Good morning, and welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin Mish.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Thanks for joining us this morning.
I don't know if you can hear the smile in my voice today or not, but we're going to go out on a limb today. Today's title of the show is The 7 Deadly Sins That Can Get an IRS Employee Fired or Even Imprisoned.
And this topic came up from a prior conversation on the air.
Yeah, it absolutely did, and we're going to be really fair today. And I don't think most of these
I'm
things...
just surprised that you were bold enough to actually do it. I'm just saying.
You know, sometimes you have to be, in search of the truth, you have to be controversial, right? Because
controversial's fun. You're an attorney. You can agree with that.
And our society is going more and more towards this direction where the truth is becoming more and more controversial, right? I mean,
isn't that the truth?
It's amazing, and it's a little bit scary, but anyway, we're going to talk about the 7 deadly sins that can get an IRS employee fired or even possibly, imprisoned or jailed. So let's talk about some of the 7 deadly sins. I mean, I'm sure there's people who are like, okay, get to it.
I'm so excited about this show. I just can't believe we're actually doing it.
Okay, so, and as you listen to this, and we hope that you listen to the whole show, or if you miss some of it, you get it, you visit the podcast at IRS Solution Attorney and listen to the whole show. We're probably going to say this gets violated a lot. We probably are.
Really?
So, the first one is the right to quality service. Now, anyone who's listening to the show right now is like, what? How do you have the right to quality service? And even anyone who's called the IRS in the last 5 years realizes that, I don't know, if 2-hour hold times on the phone with a courtesy disconnect is exactly quality.
That's exactly
quality service. For those of you who don't know, what did I say?
Courtesy
disconnect is when you've been on hold for so long that even the IRS is embarrassed by your hold time, so they just disconnect you out of common courtesy.
I don't even think it's that. I think they don't want to pay the toll-free. Don't they get charged, like put them in the stove for the 800 lines? A little bit.
If the government is paying per minute for their toll-free service, then as a taxpayer, I'm not very happy with that. I mean,
nothing would surprise me.
But yeah, it probably goes to... they probably are paying. They're probably paying 50 cents a minute, and it probably goes back to some politician's phone company.
Does the courtesy disconnect happen around lunchtime and time to leave? Is that the pretty normal time?
I have not experienced a courtesy disconnect in quite some time because now I have a workaround to get to the IRS.
He's got the VIP line for the IRS.
Well, what it is, I actually pay a private service, a monthly fee, so that I can be talking to an IRS employee in about 3 minutes.
Sweet.
So for your average person, I mean, there would be no point in paying for this service. But for me, and I don't actually call those toll-free numbers all that often. I might call them a couple times a month. It's still worth the fee that I have to pay.
Right.
So I am actually paying per minute to talk to them. And so I do find myself saying, like, come on, can you hurry up? Like,
can we expedite this process here?
Why is this taking so long? But, so anyway, the right to quality service.
So how is this a deadly sin?
So taxpayers have the right to receive prompt, courteous, and professional assistance in their dealings with the IRS, to be spoken to in a way that can be easily understood, to receive clear and easily understandable communications from the IRS, and to speak to a supervisor about inadequate service. Yeah, interesting.
So if they say, what? If they're rude to you, if they say, no, you're not talking to my superior, like, is that one thing that can get them fired?
Yeah, if they deny your right to, if they're actually exceptionally rude to you, or they don't explain stuff to you. If you don't receive quality service, then you can complain, and theoretically they can be fired, or probably not jailed for this one.
I would hope not.
Let's be honest.
I think you'd be lucky to get them fired.
And
since these happen all the time.
Toward the end of the show, we're going to talk about specifically how to make these complaints if you feel like they're appropriate in your particular case.
And legit.
Just to follow up on this, IRS representatives should listen objectively and consider all relevant information and answer questions promptly, accurately, and thoroughly. Generally, you can speak to an employee supervisor if you have a problem, although let me circle back to that in a second. When collecting tax, the IRS should treat you with courtesy. Generally, the IRS should only contact you between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m., pretty long hours.
Yeah, that is.
And the IRS should not contact you at your place of employment if the IRS knows or has reason to know that your employer does not allow such contacts. So that's sort of interesting, too.
So they have to follow the standard collection laws, where if you say, hey, my employer does not allow, or I can't take personal calls at work, they can't call you there.
Yeah, so here we're in the nitty-gritty, right? We're in the weeds here talking about what they can do. So I would guess that if they can only contact you between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. and they call you at 6 in the morning, that's probably a significant violation of this rule, and I can imagine that they would be at least disciplined for doing that if you could prove that, especially if it wasn't an accident. Like I could think
Is
of
that local time or does it matter? Because there's IRS centers all over.
Yeah, it's local. It would be taxpayer time, right? So wherever the taxpayer
Where they're
is.
at.
It kind of reminds me of this case that I have that I'm working an offer, and the offer specialist is in Memphis, Tennessee, and her shift is from 5 p.m. Eastern to 1 a.m. Eastern.
So interesting.
And she wants me to call her while she's working. Okay, fine. If she would answer the phone, like say between 5 and 6, that's somewhat reasonable, but she doesn't answer the phone. So what she wants me to do is she wants me to, be at home and call her at 9:30, 10 p.m. at night, and I just have to refuse as a matter of principle. I mean, This is unreasonable. So circling back to you have the right to speak to the supervisor. So I sent her a fax. Hey, I want to talk to your supervisor, not about anything you specifically have done, but I want to talk to her about the reasonableness of me being assigned this case with you, who works this crazy shift. Now, the reason that she works that crazy shift most likely is because that's a fairly convenient time to talk to taxpayers, right, when they're home after work. But if that taxpayer has a rep on the East Coast, it doesn't make any sense.
At all.
So, I mean, if she's in Memphis and she's working cases in California with regular taxpayers, I mean, I get it.
And she must want that shift. I don't know why they would choose that. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I don't know. Because even her local time, it's
Central.
It's like 4 to midnight or something.
Yeah.
So I guess there's people that would like that shit. Not me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Anyway.
So, so you have the right to quality service. I think this one gets violated quite a bit, but.
And it's so controversial. Like, what does that even mean? Obviously, quality service does not have the same meaning to the IRS as it would to someone else. That's a tax problem.
Yeah, it's not like going to Chick-fil-A where they're, overly polite.
Yeah.
Everything is my pleasure.
How may we serve you? My pleasure.
Exactly. Although those kids that work there, I think they're going places. I really do. That's good training.
That's my first job ever.
Or is that right?
Yep.
I did not know that. So.
I was 14 years old. It was my first job. And they didn't want to hire anybody 14.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you work at Chick-fil-A. You turn into a radio diva and a real estate mogul.
The guy, I still remember him. He was so awesome. Like, he was like, we don't usually hire your age, but, you're going to be 15. You seem like you have all this figured out, like how you're going to get to work and like I just feel like I can count on you. That's what he said.
Incidentally, my first job, I was 14 as well.
Ah, see there? But it wasn't a Chick-fil-A.
No, it was at a Carville ice cream parlor.
All right, so the IRS Solution Attorney Show will be back in just a minute with the 7 sins.
Welcome back. This is the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am that guy that handles and helps people with IRS tax problems. The IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin Mish.
I can verify that he is, and I'm your co-host, Katrina Maple. Welcome back to the show, and if you were listening to the show when Pat George wasn't, and he cut me off, you did hear his name. I was trying to say the 7 deadly sins of the IRS commit. They can get them fired or jailed.
Exactly. Okay, so moving right along.
Yeah, anytime, Darrin.
We're discussing the 7 deadly sins. We already talked about the first one. That is the right to quality service. So if an IRS employee, significantly violates your right to have obtained quality service from the IRS, then they can be, disciplined or even fired. In that case, I have a hard time imagining them being fired or imprisoned for the failure to provide quality service, but one never knows, right? So,
Exactly, and they're so funny.
So the second one is the right to challenge the IRS's position and be heard, and I think this is actually really important. So the average taxpayer thinks that the IRS can just say, all right, that's it. You owe us X number of dollars, and that's it. There's no opportunity to complain. We say so you owe the money.
You lose.
Yeah.
You lose.
And it feels like that. But
Oh, you know what I'm saying.
It feels like that. But in fact, I had an IRS employee, appeals employee, tell me,
You lose.
I mean, literally, this has never happened. I've been doing this kind of work for 18 years. She says to me on the phone, you lose, you lose, you lose. And I don't even know why we're discussing this. Now, by the way, it's just a PS as a side note. I've won that case 3 times in a row now with her, and we are ultimately going to prevail. And no, I do not lose. Not in that case.
It's not going to be your final word. You lose.
I'm not saying that I never lose. I'm not saying that at all. But in that case, I don't think I'm going to lose that case.
I'm sure you probably want to call and make that your final word. You lose, but you never know when you're going to bump back into her again. So
Actually, I have another case with her right now. And so what I've been able to do is it started out really rough. On that first call, she's like, you lose, you lose. I don't even know what we're talking about this. And I asked to speak to the supervisor, like we have the right, like we talked about the right to request that in the first segment of the show. And I didn't get to speak to the supervisor, but the supervisor told her she was wrong, and we circled back and we fixed our issue that we were having. And so the coolest thing about this is if you have, in a professional capacity, if you have those types of disagreements, if you handle them correctly and appropriately, that person will become your ally in future cases. Now, a bad rep would just like burn the bridge behind and blow it up, and you'd have a wreckage behind you, and it wouldn't work out. Now, there is one revenue officer here in town, and I won't mention his name. And,
we got a 50-50 shot. We know who it is. It's a guy. Just kidding.
Where recently he just blatantly lied. He said he wasn't going to do something, and then he did it. And he levied my client's bank account over a trivial amount of money. And
is this on one of the sins?
And I believe he did. I didn't complain that through official channels because that's just going.
You got to pick your fights.
That's going thermonuclear. But I did tell him what I thought of him, and I might have blown the bridge up, but I bet you I didn't.
Just a little hole in the bridge. That's all.
Yeah, it was like I told him what I thought, and I told him, look, you're not going to do that again. So anyway, we're talking about the right to challenge the IRS's position and be heard. So the taxpayers have right to the right to raise objections and provide additional documentation in response to formal IRS actions or proposed actions. To expect that the IRS will consider their timely objections and documentation promptly and fairly, and to receive a response if the IRS does not agree with their position. So in a nutshell, if the IRS notifies you that your tax return, for example, has a mathematical or clerical error, you have 60 days to tell the IRS that you disagree. I mean, that's good to know, right? They can't just say, hey, you screwed up it's usually an arithmetic error, addition or subtraction. They can't just unilaterally change the return and assess you additional tax. They have to tell you about it. It usually comes out on a letter called a CP 2000, and you have 60 days to respond. You can either agree, and if you agree, then you agree to what they're saying, and you usually owe more money. If you disagree, then you have the right to respond within 60 days and provide the additional documentation and whatnot. I had a gentleman come in yesterday, and that was the position. The IRS was saying he had a CP 2000, and the IRS was saying he owed about $21,000 and change. And he had already gone to a tax preparer, and their position was, no, I owe more money, but it's only like $11,000. So that's a pretty big swing, 10 grand. And so that wasn't a great case for me, and so what I did is I just sat down with them and I just sort of explained, okay, here's what you do, and make sure that you get this postmarked by the deadline, and so on and so forth. So, before the IRS takes enforcement action to collect a tax debt by levying, for example, by levying your wages or your bank account, they have to file, they have to send you, basically give you notice. They have to send you a final notice of intent to levy, and they have to give you 30 days to appeal and whatnot. So they can't, that's the other thing that people are really afraid of, and rightfully so, is that the IRS is just going to take their bank account or take their paycheck.
Swoop in.
And I get to explain to people almost every day that no, they can't do that unless they've given you, followed these proper steps.
And even if they do it, like your account's not frozen, that's a common misconception.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's not frozen. It's just
they've swooped whatever's in there at that time.
Yeah, your funds in the bank are kept or frozen for 21 days, but you can actually use your bank account the second day after the levy is imposed.
So one of our questions is, if someone owes taxes and they've not filed for several years, do they have to file before you can help them? That's what somebody wants to know. Most of the time, your customers have not, right?
Yeah, most of my clients are non-filers, and so I would actually prefer that they don't file before they come in. I would prefer to help them all the way through that process, to help get those returns prepared, because there's some strategy that goes into that thought process. And so, yeah, I mean, I can still help you if let's say you haven't filed for 6 years, and you go to someone else and you get the returns prepared and they're filed now, and you owe a bunch of money. Sure, I can help you for sure.
But if they're not filed, don't file it to try to get a head start.
Yeah, and here's an example why. Let's say you're a non-filer for 10 years, and you go to Sam, the tax preparer on the corner. Sam's going to go ahead and prepare 10 years of returns.
Right.
But we know from doing this show that you don't have to file all 10 years of those returns. You only have to file 6 of the 10. So I just saved you, with that one comment, 4 years worth of taxes plus interest plus penalties. And I've seen it many, many times where they go to somebody who doesn't handle IRS tax controversy work, that doesn't know that 6-year rule, and I've seen 13-year-old returns filed. and it just makes you smack your head. You're like, wow, that's like some epically bad
Well,
advice.
I mean, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if you're, a CPA or an unenrolled tax preparer, somebody who just prepares for taxes, or even an enrolled agent, and you don't do a lot of tax problem work, you may be unaware of that particular rule, and that's costing companies money.
And if you've listened to the show for any period of time, you probably don't know because Darrin never really tells you. But he actually will put on like seminars in front of CPAs to teach them this kind of stuff and more.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a proud papa.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't brag on himself, but he does.
There's some really good guys and gals all around this country. There's even one in this marketplace that I've actually trained, and I'm proud because it's kind of like it's a mentorship kind of deal, right? So if you're doing quality work and you're teaching, which weird is I'm teaching competitors, right? But
there's plenty of fish in the sea. The likelihood of you ever competing for the same client is slim to none. That's
there's plenty of work. So it's not, for me, it's not about that. It's about making sure that, number one, these students of mine can make a great living and providing for their families. And number two, they're providing superior services to taxpayers, all around the country, making sure that taxpayers get treated right and they get the help they need.
Which they are clearly not getting from the IRS. So.
Well, yeah, they're not getting it from the IRS, that's for sure. So let's talk about the third possible deadly sin, and that's, off-duty conduct. So let me just read this real quick.
So off-duty conduct. So, I imagine that applies like it would for any of us. Like you have to watch what you do in your outside life and what you're posting on social media and that kind of stuff. It's not just while you're on the job.
Yeah, it says they will not engage when we come back.
Way to cut it off there, Pat.
When we come back, we'll talk about what kind of off-duty conduct can get IRS employees, fired. And here, they actually could be imprisoned.
We were actually just talking about this in our house, how the stuff you post on social media and all across everywhere, it follows you into your life, into your jobs, into your future. So it'll be interesting to see how this affects and impacts an IRS employee. If you want to reach Darrin, you can get him directly at his off-air number at 888-GET-MISH.
That's 888-438-6474.
And again, that's 888-GET-MISH.
888-438-6474. Visit the website at getirshelp.com. Podcast, app, all that stuff. Look it up. IRS Solution Attorney.
And we're here in the studio. If you got a question, call Pat. He's back there at 888-404-1010. We'll be back in a minute.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Mabel. Thanks for sticking around through the break.
So, before we were so abruptly cut off in the last segment, we were talking about off-duty conduct that can get IRS employees in trouble. And it's just the kind of things that you would think about. If they're charged with a crime or infamous, dishonest, or notoriously disgraceful conduct, or any conduct prejudicial to the government.
What does that even mean?
So that's like lawyer language, right?
No, but just think about that little phrase. Notoriously disgraceful conduct. Really?
Lois Lerner.
Really? Really?
Although she wasn't disciplined even. But I don't think she works at the IRS anymore. Lois Lerner was the woman that was accused, never convicted, although she pled the fifth. When questioned before Congress, she was accused of basically discriminating against conservative, nonprofits, and slow walking or denying their applications to be treated as such. I would suggest that that's probably wildly inappropriate if actually proven.
But I think it would fit more into one of the next sins even better than this one.
Yeah, for sure. But I would say, IRS, let's say just this, I don't know this to be true, I'm just giving an example. An IRS revenue officer who is engaged in any kind of theft or dishonesty or any kind of immoral behavior, for sure, that ought to get you fired, don't you think?
Yeah. Most of us have to, pass background checks and follow a certain code of ethics to even remain in our job. If you do stuff like that, Darrin, you can get disbarred.
You think?
So why should the rules be any different for them?
Yeah, if an attorney is charged with a crime, particularly a drug or alcohol-related crime, then it has to be immediately reported. I forget how long we have. It's not very long.
Same for us. If you have an agent, a real estate agent, and they get a DUI or something like that, you have to report it to the state.
And I think it's appropriate, right? Because if there's, particularly with attorneys, I can't speak to real estate agents, but attorneys are oftentimes, charged with taking care of clients' money and things like that. So if there's a drug or alcohol crime, the bar is interested in heading that off before it turns into something bigger. The bar actually, for most of these low-level stuff like DUIs and even some drug charges, the bar is more interested in diverting you into some kind of a program so you can get your treatment, so you can stop whatever it is that you're doing. So that it
They
doesn't
gotta
get
make sure
worse.
you pay those student loans so you're not a client of Darrin's.
There's absolutely a zero tolerance policy for the Florida bar in theft of client funds.
Oh, yeah.
Zero tolerance, like
Oh,
a
yeah,
penny
it
is a
should be.
problem. And unfortunately, I've known many lawyers over the years who have forgotten that ethical rule and have, quote, borrowed money.
How do you forget that? Oh, you're talking about they give you a deposit.
Well, think about this, like in a personal injury attorney's case, right? The personal injury attorney represents a client, and the insurance company is going to cut the check to the lawyer.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
So the lawyer has the big pot of money.
And they've already got a contract that says what their percentage is gonna be.
Exactly, and so the lawyer's supposed to cut, the client, and cut his share out, and give the lion's share of the money to the client, and I've known guys over the years that have just kind of not adhered to that scrupulously and have gotten disbarred.
But you're supposed to have a contract, right? Clearly outlining what that settlement is gonna be?
But yeah, you do, absolutely, but human beings sometimes make poor choices.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about. The next one would be any kind of bias-motivated conduct. So basically,
On or off duty.
yeah, abusive, derisive, profane, or demeaning statements, conduct, or gestures evidencing hatred or invidious prejudice. I love that. That's really interesting. To or about another person or group on account of race, color, religion, national
Right.
origin, sex, sexual orientation, age, or disability. Again, this sort of is like common sense.
I wonder
right?
how often like the race card comes up. You think?
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
Not even anything remotely close. So I'm going to give the IRS kudos here. Never seen it. Never seen any kind of, maybe I'm blind to it, but I've never seen any kind of behavior, at least on duty, from an IRS employee that ever even came close to the line. As far as that bias stuff, I think they go through probably a whole lot of training about that.
So the next one is almost comical when they say the membership and participation in hate groups. Really?
It's a sad testimony that even has to be said, right? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, a representative of the United States government and all that that entails should not be participating in hate groups of any kind. And there's hate groups on both sides, in my opinion. Most people only think of hate groups like Nazis and whatnot.
So
But there's hate groups, there's all kinds of hate
Yeah.
groups and prejudicial groups.
the next one is pretty funny too, because if you look at how that's worded, like let's talk about it and talk about how it's worded, and let's really talk about this.
Okay, so the Treasury rules of conduct prohibit the sale, use, or possession of
But
controlled
it's
substances.
their alcohol and drug policy.
Yeah, it's just their alcohol and drug policy. Again, I mean, every big company has an alcohol.
I know, but read it. It's interesting.
So it says the Treasury rules of conduct prohibit the sale, use, or possession of controlled substances and intoxicants by employees while on departmental property, while on duty, or in a manner that adversely affects their work performance.
So technically, they can kind of do whatever they want when they're not on duty. That's what I'm reading from that. Do you not read it like that? You're a lawyer. As long as it doesn't affect their performance at work.
Okay. Back in the day, in the 70s, and I'm not old enough to actually remember this as an adult, but back in the 70s, I mean, lawyers and judges would go to lunch and
It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby.
they'd have 3 martinis, no problem,
Yeah.
And then the judges would assume the bench and would go about their day. I think our societal attitudes about alcohol in particular have really changed over the years. And actually, you can see it happening with marijuana now.
Yes. Yes.
10 years ago, the discussion of legalizing marijuana was just laughable. Like, it was never going to happen. And now it's legal in X number of states.
And now if you live in Colorado, people are like, we know what you do in your free time.
I know a lot of people in Colorado, some that are watching on Facebook Live right now, and they don't. But
Well, it's just funny how, like, that's the status quo. Like,
Yeah.
if you live in Florida, you don't know how to count votes. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
anyway.
So, I think this comes up a lot with IRS employees, like revenue officers or even special agents who drive or carry firearms, for example. I mean, it shouldn't have to be said, but it is, that, any substance that can impair their ability to safely carry a firearm, operate a motor vehicle, or otherwise perform their duties at any time during their duty day, they can't participate in that. So I think this makes sense,
Yeah.
right? So if you've got a TIGTA guy who's basically a TIGTA person is either, they have two roles, and we're going to talk about how to complain. And TIGTA is one of the places that you complain. TIGTA is the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Affairs. But anyway, what they do is they have two functions. They're internal affairs, and they're like Secret Service. So they investigate IRS employees' behavior or issues, but they also protect them. So on a couple of occasions, I've had taxpayers who just insisted they're going to go down and do harm to IRS employees. And what the public doesn't realize is that you can tell a lawyer about a past crime, and there's attorney-client privilege, right? So literally somebody could walk into my office and say, I killed a guy and he's buried in the backyard. Nothing I can say. I'm prohibited by law from telling anybody that, okay? But if you come to my office and you say, I'm gonna kill the guy and bury him in my backyard, that changes everything. So what happens is I have to report that at that point, and this has happened on 2 occasions that I can think of, where some clients just got a little overzealous and they continued to insist they were going to go down and do harm to people at the IRS building, and I told them, I need you to recant that because I have to call, I got to do something about it if I really think you're going to do it. And they wouldn't recant it, so I had to call TIGTA on a couple occasions because I didn't want to see like a shooting.
You don't want that on your hands.
Or something like that. And eventually became friends with the local TIGTA guy, and he's a great guy and whatnot. But it's just sort of interesting that the TIGTA actually has that dual role, the protection and investigation. It's kind of weird, but
sounds like the union. Anyway, racial profiling and other bias-based law enforcement actions. That's another one.
Again, race, color, national origin, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation, age, gender, identity, or disability, and even some that aren't necessarily protected. There's policy against treating people like that. So they can't say, well, this person is of a particular ethnicity, I don't like those people. They can't do that.
And the next one is pretty cool, because this one actually outlines personal use of social media.
Yeah, and this specifically deals with TIGTA officials, and it says that they can't promote their professional responsibilities in your profiles or postings on social media websites. So you couldn't brag about being a TIGTA official, and you couldn't, they don't want you to provide details regarding your work colleagues, official position, duties, or training. They don't want you to use your personal accounts to access social media sites for official business. So in other words, if they're doing an investigation on John Smith suspect, they don't want you logging into your personal Facebook account, for example, and looking at John Smith's Facebook profile. Don't know if I totally agree with that.
But I don't know how you would possibly do that, because you have to have a personal Facebook account before you could even have a business page. So how would that be possible?
I don't know.
Is it a theoretic Facebook user?
No. It's not really that clear from the regs here.
It is not clearly outlined.
Probably what they do is they probably create an official government fake profile, and then
official government fake profile. Gotta love
that's
it.
Probably what they do. And they use it in an investigative capacity, and then go about it that way. And it kind of makes sense. The military has some of these policies as well. I have a good buddy who's a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and he doesn't have a Facebook. He doesn't have any social media profiles. I would love it if he...
You are killing us back there today.
I would love it if he did, because we would be able to keep in touch better. His wife does, but in the military, in particular, I think officers, they don't want you to be on social media because there's terrorism concerns.
Yeah, Secret Service, like any of that stuff. Many even law enforcement officers choose to either not partake in social media at all or not even have an account.
Yeah, I come to think of it, I have a couple buddies that are cops, and they use pseudonyms and stuff like that. Because it makes sense. They don't want the bad guys coming, finding their kids and stuff.
Absolutely, which is why they mask all their information from public records. So you're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. Today's show is the 7 deadly sins that can get an IRS employee fired or even imprisoned. We'll be back in just a minute to chat about the rest.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. Darrin T. Mish here, the IRS Solution Attorney.
I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Thanks for sticking around and to the wonderful intro music that Pat George slid in there.
What movie was that from? I can't remember. Eddie Murphy?
Pat will know.
Oh, that was
no,
Rocky
it wasn't.
4?
Was it?
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
I'm the wrong person to ask about movies. We were talking about this on the way in. I know nothing about anything.
I'm putting that song on my phone, and I'm listening to that on the way home, on the way to the office today.
On the way to the port.
So we're talking about the 7 deadly sins that the IRS can commit that can get them fired or even in prison.
Let's just run through them real quick. We'll list them all.
I don't think we have time. So, because we promised that we were going to go ahead and tell people.
Yes.
Let's tell them how to complain, and then if we have time, we'll do
Okay.
that. Okay? So what you do, if you really have what you think is a legitimate complaint, you're going to call the Treasury Inspector General. That's TIGTA that we've been talking about, and their phone number is 1-800-366-4484. 1-800-366-4484. Do not call my office if you have a complaint about the behavior of an IRS employee. No offense. I understand. I respect it, but it's just not a good case for us to work on together. TIGTA does this for a living. This is what they do. 1-800-366-4484. You can file a complaint with them by phone, or you can mail a written complaint. Just go ahead and Google TIGTA, and the address will be, on a webpage someplace. It's in DC. Or you can email your complaint to complaints@tigta.treas.gov, and that goes to their to them as well.
And TIGTA, it's like TIGTA.
Yeah, TIGTA. That's how you're going to Google it. These guys they treat complaints seriously. Okay, so there will be an investigation. You can't say that anything will come of it, but there will definitely be an investigation. And I think IRS employees have sort of a love-hate relationship with TIGTA because there's some fear involved, but then they're also charged with making sure that they remain safe. So it's an interesting dynamic.
So if you missed any part of the show today, the whole thing, you can catch it in its entirety at the IRS Solution Attorney Show. Just search.
Exactly. There's a website that's the IRSSolutionAttorney.com. You can visit the main website, get IRSHelp.com. There's links all over the place. Podcasts or app, all different ways to...
And the whole show, it came out actually from a prior conversation on the air, but it's the 7 deadly sins that the IRS can fall into that can get them fired or terminated or jailed.
Yeah, basically, they have to follow their own internal rules. And so as a taxpayer, you should either learn the rules that they have to follow or hire somebody who does.
Yep. And those 7 real quick, should we run through them? Yeah, we'll do it real quick. So right to quality service, violating the taxpayer bill of rights, meaning the right to challenge and be heard, off-duty conduct in general, bias-motivated conduct, member or participation in hate groups, alcohol and drug policy, racial profiling, or other bias-based law enforcement action, personal use of social media, that's almost laughable, how to complain to the IRS about a misconduct, again, with giving information. So.
Yeah, you get in touch with TIGTA, that's TIGTA. Just go ahead and Google it. There'll be lots of ways to communicate with those guys about your complaints about the behavior of IRS employees. It's about that time.
The train's right on time this week.
It's time for the IRS train right of the week.
So this one's going to be fun.
Yeah, this is the segment of the show where we talk about a win, right?
Yes.
I mean, pretty much.
And for me, this is always like Bob and Sally Jones or whoever. Like, there's never any names, just hypothetical, these people that owed money.
Yeah, so Katrina just kind of checks out usually during this segment of the show because it's like, oh, this is Darrin's thing. He's going to tell me some story that's,
somebody I never met, members I never heard.
Somebody you'll never know. But in this case, it's kind of cool. It's different because Katrina and I joined forces on this one.
Yes,
it was like a team of superheroes on this one. So go ahead and lay it out a little bit.
Okay, so the story behind this one is I had a customer that's been a long time client of mine for several years. She originally wanted to buy a bigger house in a different area. At the time, her equity position, she did not have enough equity to sell this property, so we rented it. And so this is probably 3 or 4 renters later that is occupying this property now. It's a little townhouse, so it's a nice little newer place. And so we put this tenant in the property like a year ago, and she says, hey, I think my lease is coming up soon. I want to talk about actually selling it. We're going to look at those numbers. So we did. And we're like, yeah, we determined this is probably a really good time for you to sell based on the numbers. And the couple that were the tenants that lived in the property are an older couple. So a little bit older, I would say the very end of their working years, probably moving close into retirement. He's already on Social Security, and one of them works. So just to kind of give you a foundation for who they are. And so if you can imagine what a move would be like, you get maybe a couple months notice, and even to have showings in and out the house when it's not your place.
Yeah.
Super inconvenient. And they, I was sharing with Darrin this morning that even when we did the rental pre-screen, we're more lenient than a lot of other companies, but it was pretty like on the fence. Like it could have went either way. And they were just such a sweet little couple. We're like, all right, we're going to give them a chance, but they're going to have to pay like an extra month's rent, so the buffer's there, and we had to get them ahead and all that kind of stuff. So long story short, I approached her and I said, look, we did your credit pull a year ago, and I think it's okay that we can probably, make this happen for you because the owner wants to sell the property if you're interested in buying it. So that's basically what happened. But we had, when we pulled the credit, there was a tax lien on there that was kind of old, and it was almost $5,700. And I called Dan and I said, hey, I probably need your help with this. Can you jump in and check this out and, tell me the details on this? Because I know when they're kind of old, sometimes you can get around and work around that stuff.
Yeah, because remember, the statute of limitations is 10 years from the date the tax is assessed, and so when I heard about this $5,700 tax lien, I was like, oh, yeah, it's not for sure, but almost certainly we can get that thing released with minimal difficulty. And what happened is, so we teamed up and
We gave it to you early, which was good.
yeah, it was really good. And we actually had trouble. Remember, we were looking for it, and it was filed in a different county.
And it had a very common name.
Very common name. A few counties over, big county, big urban county, and we had a heck of a time finding the thing. Well, long story short, we thought they owed like $5,700 plus interest and penalties. Turns out they owed almost $28,000
Yes.
plus interest and penalties. That wasn't even part of the story. We knew nothing
Right,
about
and here's
this.
the thing for us, this would have came up at the title search in the end.
Yeah.
That's where it would have held it up.
It would have been a disaster. It would have been like the day of or 3 days prior or
Well,
something.
a little more now, but still at the end.
Yeah, it would have been right at the end, and it would have been a disaster. Long story short, we got the liens released, and this nice, beautiful elderly couple got to stay in their house.
Zippo.
They didn't have to move, and they got to experience a little slice of the
Yes.
American dream.
Yes. So when I called her, because like I told Darrin, they were barely like squeezing in there. So I took care of Darrin and I said, I'm going to take care of this for them and, pay you to get these liens released, which he did pretty quickly. And they were just like so thrilled that we were able to get them in with the money they had and they didn't have to pay this, and we made the biggest burden they ever had go away, by making a few phone calls and knowing you.
That's a beautiful thing. I love that stuff.
I know. She actually told me, Darrin, she said, I was contemplating, like, seriously divorcing my husband over this because I didn't think it was ever going to go away.
Wow. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Good. I feel happier for him than at this point, just because he didn't have to go through that.
But that's our train wreck of the week, and it was a delightful one that we had the privilege of knowing the person and working on it together.
A lot of fun.